folks, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Spotlight, brought to you by 911 Air Repair, your local air conditioning expert specializing in maintenance, repair, and new installations. Well, this is technically going to be our last regular season Friday Night Spotlight because small schools begin playoffs next week. And for our regular season finale, we got a big one here in the 3A conference. We are talking about the number 6 and number 7 team in Florence and ALA Ironwood. They're going to duke it out, not just to see who could potentially host during the first round next week, but also to see, hey, who gets this region title in the 3A in their 3A Central Conference. David, what are you expecting from this game?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned how much the implications are for this game, because it's huge. These are two really the best teams that we've had in Pinal County so far, both in the same region, both battling for that top prize, and it's been a really good battle so far, and now we get to finally see these two teams come together. And like you mentioned, this is going to have huge implications for the playoffs, because whichever team wins most likely gets to host that first round playoff game, and then whoever loses is going to have to go on the road somewhere. ALA Ironwood's been fantastic this year with running back Aiden Williams. He's been, I've said it multiple times, one of the best running backs in the state, regardless of conference. And then Florence comes in with a very high-powered offense centered by quarterback Logan Stenson. These two guys are just going to duke it out and go tit for tat here and see who's the best one. It really just comes down to who makes the least amount of mistakes. The defenses have to be strong, and it's really going to come down to what can happen down at the wire. And reports from last week, ALA Ironwood had a tough time against Santan Foothills last week, and Santan Foothills has not been a team that we've really had our eye on this year so far. They haven't really had the best success, but they gave ALA Ironwood a fight, and I don't think they were necessarily expecting that. So they can't play the same way that they did last week and expect to be Florence, because Florence is going to be a much tougher opponent for them, and this will decide the region and will decide a lot of things moving forward in the playoffs. Both teams are really highly scouted, but we're just going to come down to who makes the least amount of mistakes and who can capitalize on those mistakes.
Like David touched on this, last week my bingo card, there were a couple of things I didn't really expect. One of them being that Santan Foothills would give ALA Ironwood such a hard time, and then for Florence, Chrisman also gave them a pretty tough task. Florence barely won 21-14. It came pretty much down to the wire, as did the ALA Ironwood game. So, hey, maybe that's kind of like the game to get all the jitters out and everything, to just kind of prepare and focus for what's at stake this week. David touched on the offense. I want to highlight some of the defense for both of these teams, because these guys really deserve their flowers. Looking at Florence, Zayden Cundiff, I love this guy. I love what he can do on defense. So far, he leads the team with over 100 tackles. He's averaging 15.6 per game. Mike on deal, 4 sacks. The team has 10 total, 10 fumble recoveries, 23 passes defended. KJ Watts and Darren Swain, they have 3 interceptions each. So they have a lot of different varieties in how they can try to slow down opponents. And then for ALA Ironwood, Marcus Dorsey is that guy in the secondary. 3 interceptions so far. He has 68 tackles for them. And Bentley Hatch. Bentley Hatch is very similar to Zayden Cundiff and what he can do and put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. So far, 54 tackles. 10 of them are for a loss. And he has 6 sacks. So, hey, look for these guys to just kind of put that pressure on their opposing offenses for ALA Ironwood, trying to slow down Logan Stenson and Malik Smith. And then for Florence, look for these guys to try to slow down ALA's strong running game with Aiden Williams. Moving on to our additional games of what to watch. David, what do you have your eye on this week?
I'm looking at the Combs Coyotes going up against Desert Sunrise, and now this pick isn't necessarily for this game itself. I expect Combs to have a pretty good win here against Desert Sunrise, but every win is important for Combs at this point. They are sitting right on the bubble for the playoffs. They're sitting currently ranked 17th, so any win is important for them, especially just as much as they need at this point, because like we mentioned, this game unlocks what's going to come next week against Vista Grande, and that's going to be a really interesting game to watch, because that could ultimately decide their fate. Vista Grande is going to have a tough matchup against Arcadia this week, so if Vista Grande loses this week and Combs wins, it really going to come down to who comes out on top next week when those two teams face off each other. So Combs has been a really big surprise this year. I think we didn't really expect them to be as good as they have been, and I think they've definitely proved a lot of people wrong, including myself, and I would love to see them continue to have this success, but it really comes down to, can they win when it matters most? They're going to have to perform as much as they can. They should be able to get a win this week, but then it's really going to come down to what happens next week.
So I'm going to talk about the team that David kind of touched on here in Vista Grande. Like David mentioned, they are hosting Phoenix Arcadia for senior night. A pretty big deal here because this senior class for the Spartans, they pretty much reset the standard for this program. They just secured their 4th consecutive winning season last week. So this is a pretty big deal if these guys can go out with a bang. Looking at Phoenix Arcadia, they are a top 5 team. They are undefeated so far this season, but a little bit different from last year when Vista Grande got completely blown out is that this Arcadia team isn't quite as dominant as it was last year. Yeah, they are undefeated, but they've kind of had to readjust throughout the season. They are under a new quarterback in Zach Smith, 803 passing yards, a 70% completion rate, 10 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. But hey, Vista Grande has a really good counterattack with their own quarterback in El Tornagant, who has just completely lit up the field with his passing game, his running game, his defense. I've mentioned it before. It's like that Bugs Bunny cartoon where he's just all over the field. We saw that last week against Gilbert Mesquite. But hey, Vista Grande also has all these additional weapons that they can utilize. They've done a better job of getting their wide receivers involved and not solely relying on TJ Ortega. Their running game has always been really strong. They've just continued to add different components to build off of that and just kind of keep opponents off balance in what they can do and just be that all-around dual threat, not just being heavily based on their running game. Defensively, Vista Grande's defense is probably one of the top in the state, with guys like Jason Villegas, Athian Errol, and Blaine Abercrombie. Just all around, I think, this is that game for Vista Grande to finally make that statement. They haven't been able to do that so far this year. They failed against Prescott. It wasn't pretty against Arizona College Prep. So this is their moment to make a statement like, hey, we are one of the top teams. We can compete with quality opponents when it comes to in-state football. As always, here are our picks for the rest of our games this week, and be sure to check us out next week when we talk playoffs.